How executive ownership drives real results at the top with Dan Norenberg. Hello.
Hello, Samir. Good to
You
see
have
you.
that look like, who is Dan Norenberg on?
It's live. It's here.
How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing very well. It's good to see you, and I appreciate spending time with you.
It's been quite a while, and I've always enjoyed the conversations that we have had. So I was like, perfect guy to get on to the podcast and have a conversation.
Well, I love watching your shows. They're really informative and yet relaxed, and it speaks to your style and your ability to attract cool people to your show. So I feel very honored, and let's see how we
Oh,
can
thank you.
exchange today and see where things go.
Yeah, yep. Um, so what really struck me, I don't. We met a few years ago. You gave me your book,
God
uh,
bless you.
and was really very happy with when I was going through it. Really struck a chord with me on so many levels in terms of the work that I'm doing right now as well, which is helping managers become more effective as leaders, and that is primarily the role and position that you're in as well, I believe. Uh, Before anything, how do you come up with the title executive ownership, not ownership, ownershift?
Well, I think my work is focused on the executive team of an organization or the senior strategic leadership teams that support business functions such as supply chain, sales, production, things like that. And as in your work also, and you've also been a senior executive for many years, that at the very top, the people are very motivated. There's a lot of intellectual firepower there. They know their business area very, very well. But yet my observations have been is that as an organizational unit, and this started about 20 years ago, they didn't really play well as a team together.
Hmm.
And this became sort of both a fascination and an obsession with me if the senior leadership teams aren't playing at their best, how can anybody else in the organization? And the name came, executive means at the top of the highest importance, and ownership and ownershift have a nice nuance to it, because my work is not about a complete makeover. I'm not saying that the senior leadership teams are worthless. I'm saying that by making some small changes, they can create some huge results. And so that's where the name ownershift came in. Interestingly enough, at least in my work, and I've worked with over 150 leadership teams on 3 continents in the last 15 years, less than 1 out of 20 executive teams has a process for continuous improvement in their executive team. I mean, it's the organizational unit that has the most resources, takes the most decisions, has the most influence over the organizational culture, but yet as an organizational unit, they don't have a process in place to continually improve. And my feeling is, if you don't have a process for continuous improvement in your senior leadership team, how can you possibly drive continuous improvement over entire organizations? So that became my obsession, thus executive ownershift. And the
Yeah, I
publisher
like
was
it.
not initially excited about it. It's a little bit long. It's a Dan Norenberg title, but it sticks.
Yeah, I was thinking it's not a makeover, complete makeover, it's a shift over.
It's for all of us. I mean, in our personal life too. And maybe some of your listeners aren't an executive or aren't part of an executive team. There are a lot of principles and practices in the book that apply to everyday people. Yeah,
Mm.
and this idea is that in most cases, for us to create a dramatic improvement in our results, in our well-being, in our financial situation, in our relationship, is not a huge makeover. It's just a shift, and just identifying those 2 or 3 small things that lead to big outcomes. And that's the work that I do, helping leadership teams discover what are the 2 or 3 small things that they can do that help make a big shift in their team and in their organizational culture and results.
You said you've been in this for over 15 years. What got you into this line of work?
Well, it's initially by chance, let's say. I mean, I've always been passionate about learning and development. My father was a American football coach and a teacher, and later an administrator at the high school I went to, which is another story. Having your father as the high school principal isn't necessarily good for a young guy's well-being. And my mother was an elementary school teacher. So some kids grow up, going to the factory with their dad, or going to the bakery or something with their mother or aunt or something like that, or going to the farm and sitting on a tractor. I come from the Midwest originally, but my parents were both in education. And so I spent a lot of time around school systems. And both my parents believed that education was the great equalizer, that regardless of the background that you come from, if you have an education and you're willing to learn, that you can improve your standing in life and improve the standing of others. So that was kind of drilled into me. So I used to trail off with my mother and father to school, my mother to the kindergarten class or first grade, and I'd go down to the high school with my father very, very early. So education was always at play. In college, I looked at that. I looked at whether being a teacher or a coach was something for me, but it just didn't quite resonate. Maybe it was my memories of being in high school myself. So I got into sales and management with a couple of technology companies out in California. And that really hit home for me. And when the solar energy company went out of business, I'd sold my house, my relationship, we parted ways, and I came to Europe for 9 days. And so it's a long answer to your question, but came to Europe. I didn't speak any German, didn't have any work papers, didn't know anybody, but I saw that there was a need for pragmatic coaching and training, particularly in English, for Europeans who were doing business on the global playing field. So let's say the constraints of not speaking German, the constraints of not having working papers, the constraints of not knowing anybody kind of led me into this, although I'd done a lot of coaching and training in my line management roles. But let's say I sort of fell into it initially, and I believe I found my sweet spot.
What makes you call it your sweet spot?
Well, the sweet spot for me is when you do something that you really love. And I hope that none of my clients are on the line, but I probably do the work that I do now, even if I wasn't getting paid. I just think it's very purposeful work to be able to help others improve their standing, right? To help others improve their standing. I mean, I always feel appreciated when people help me improve my standing. So first of all, the sweet spot is when you get to do something that you really love. The second intersection of the sweet spot is to do something that you're good at. And the fact that I've been in business now for over 30 years in Europe, with starting really from nothing, with the help of a lot of people, is another indication. And the third thing is, does the work, is it passionate? Is it purposeful? And are you able to generate value for the people that you work with? And the work can be very lucrative. I don't think anybody gets into this business of learning and development because they want to make millions of dollars. I don't think that's the purpose for getting in. But if you come in and you work purposefully and you help people and they profit, then you in turn profit from that. So those are the three intersections of the sweet spot.
And if you worked with so many executives over the years, when you meet someone who is not operating from their sweet spot, how do you deal with that?
Well, the first question is, you got to do a little bit of a hard diagnosis. Do people recognize it's not their sweet spot? I mean, I'm in a very fortunate position because I get to create something. I get to create a sort of a learning program or platform for particularly leadership teams. I get to go out and present that into the marketplace, and then I get to deliver that. So I'm involved in all aspects of product development, the marketing, and also the delivery, and I get to see the results of how it works or not. And that's a very unusual place to be, I think, in this day and age. So I'm not sure that everybody finds, particularly their entire sweet spot, within a corporate setting. But the question is, do they find meaning and purpose in what they do? Do they feel appreciated for what they do? And do they feel that the contributions that they make into the team and organization they work with, makes a difference?
So not everyone is geared for entrepreneurship, right? Not everyone is geared for doing everything together.
Well, thank goodness.
Right.
Thank goodness. Imagine that we had a world of 8.1 billion Elon Musks. I mean, and this is nothing critical about Elon Musk. He's a brilliant guy. How many guys can land a spaceship back on a pad? But we need all kinds of people. We need all kinds of people who are fulfilling different roles in a society. So I'm always pleased to see people who are doing things very different than me, who enjoy what they do. And without them, without the plumber who comes to fix our leaky pipes, we'd be in a wet house.
Yeah. And but the world is moving towards a gig economy, right? We see more and more of the gig economy rising, unlike any time before in the world. What do you think of that, number one? And then I'll go to my next question.
Yeah, I mean, things have certainly changed in the last 20 or 30 years. I mean, although I've been an entrepreneur, self-employed, have run businesses for the past, I think it's 40 years now. I think it was 40 years ago that I began my first entrepreneurial venture. And I never wanted to be that. That's not what I wanted to be. But the solar energy business that I was with went out of business. And in those days, the corporate entity was very, very strong, and usually came out of college or your technical studies, and you went to maybe one organization or another and stayed there for a long time. That sort of changed, and the stints became smaller, anywhere from 2 to 10 years. And now the organizations, I think, are also attempting to be a lot more fluid, so that they're not necessarily looking for lifelong employees. They're looking for employees or partners or gig partners, if you will, who can fulfill a certain capability for a certain time. And so I think it's just important for all of us to, I think it returns to continuous learning. No matter who you are and what you do, you've always got to have on your agenda continuous learning. And of course, there are many resources out there, in the internet, in YouTube, through AI, that can help all of us continue to improve. And I think that's what's most important, that we've got to be a little more cognizant. I don't think there need to be fearful, but it just means we need to make the owner shift into taking more accountability for our future, for our learning, and recognize that not everything is forever.
Speaking of forever, sometimes people, they leave their jobs, if they lose their jobs, and they go into entrepreneurship, thinking, I have more freedom, I have more flexibility, I have all of this, but sometimes it's about jumping from one frying pan to another, right? It is about realizing there's so much of. So I'll just rewind back to what you said earlier. The book has got so much to offer for yourself, and whether you're an executive or not, which means, are you managing yourself or are you leading yourself, right? How are you showing up for your own self? And a lot of times people think that because I have the title, I have the power and I can be a leader.
Well, leader isn't, in my eyes, isn't really it's not a position, it's not a position or a title, it's a practice. And it's how we lead ourselves that in fact impact how we lead others. And coming back to what you said earlier about it's also about managing expectations. So I have also seen people who say, gosh, Dan, it looks like a really exciting thing what you do there. I feel like I could do that. And there's no reason that you couldn't, if that's really what you want to do. But it's about managing expectations and exploring the ground, in front of you. So if you think that you want to change a role or go into a new field or even move to a new city, for example, it doesn't cost anything to do a little bit of research, talk to 3 or 4 people who live in that city. I mean, there are very few people that don't want to help you, right? If you just reach out and say, hey, can I have 15, 20 minutes of your time? Or talk to a professor, or reach out to somebody in a company that you really admire and say, I've read some of your articles in the newspaper. I've seen you. Would you have 15, 20 minutes so I could pick your brain? I find that for the most part, people are very open and willing, but oftentimes people jump, as you said, from one frying pan to the next without really exploring what that reality looks like. And case in point, many years ago, I worked with a really successful senior HR director. He was really a sharp guy. And his ambition was always to go, into a personal coaching practice such as I have, which he did. And I didn't see him for about 12 or 18 months. And I finally caught up with him and I said, Manfred, how's it going? He said, not well at all. I said, What do you mean you're doing your dream role? This is what you wanted to do 2 years ago. You told me you wanted to step out, and I see that you're out there. He goes, yes, but things aren't well at home. I said, well, why not? He said, well, I told my wife that I would make twice as much money as I was making before, and I would work half the time. I'm actually working twice as much as I was, and I'm making half of what I was as I was employed. So I said, well, how could you possibly expect to go fly high on your first venture? I mean, all entrepreneurs know it's always going to take twice as long as you think it's going to take.
Yeah.
It's going to be the hardest thing you ever do, and the outcomes that you get are generally going to look differently than you expect. So what I would say, coming back to your point, is that explore possible landscapes. And now with AI, with internet, with the transparency, with the connection through LinkedIn, it's very easy to check in with people and just say, hey, let me bounce this off. If everybody gives you a negative read, it still doesn't mean you can't do it. And I've done that many times too. Oftentimes my wife will give me advice and I'll do something completely different. She said, well, you're not listening to me. I said, I'm listening very, very closely to you. But I've made a living often by taking the path less traveled. And I respect her value and her insights very, very much. But sometimes I'll choose to go a different way. So we always have that option as well.
Yeah. Listening is not the same. I mean, listening does not equate to obeying, right?
Great point.
Listening is taking inputs.
Yeah.
Listening is having more data points before you make a decision.
Yeah. And you want to choose carefully about who you get information from, right? I mean, if you sometimes ask the people who are around you in your, let's say, nest, they may discourage you from trying something interesting or new or novel because maybe they'd heard of somebody who tried something that didn't work, or maybe they don't have the vision to do something on their own. So I think it's important to get outside in perspectives, but you've also got to be careful about the sources that you use to seek information from.
And this goes very much to the corporate world, right? Where managers feel like if I tell my team members what to do, then they have to execute that and they have to obey me. And if they don't do it, then it is disobedience to what I have instructed them to do. But
it depends on the mindset. Oh, sorry for jumping there, but it depends on the mindset. What is my understanding of being a manager or being a leader? Now in the classic, let's say, Latin-based sense of the word manager means admin or hand, to have a hand on things, to control, to monitor, to evaluate, to check. So it's a very close hand on things, but that's hard work. That's really hard work. And I think the transition between manager and moving into leadership, it's less hands on the actual work itself. If you've got people in your team, it seems to me to be a hard work to be controlling them and commanding them, because that brings everything back to you, right? You're in a spider web and you're the spider, if you will. It's the hub and spoke. And then you don't have any time as a manager to develop yourself, look for new opportunities for the team, or to explore what a new strategic outcome might mean for the team. So I think that's this leader role is also about, really having some strong conversations with yourself about what's my understanding of leadership. What does my team expect of me? What do I expect of them? And what do we expect of each other? There might be some people in a team that really want to be closely monitored and checked and perhaps even told what to do. I'd say that's less than 20% of team members in any team that I've ever worked with. But 30 to 40% would like to know, what is it that we're trying to achieve, and, really let me run with it. And then there's another 20, 30% that might say, well, I'd even like to be involved in creating, what we want to accomplish. I'd like to be involved in the goal setting. So I think it comes back to expectation management, expectation exchange, but telling people what to do that's really hard work.
My next question is, and I'm really curious about this. You just mentioned about speaking to yourself and building your own self-awareness, but when you're speaking to yourself, your level of awareness is where you will operate from. And if you want to have a deeper self-awareness, unless and until someone is not asking you the hard questions, you will only operate from your own level of awareness, and therefore the answers might not be the best of answers, correct? My question is, what have you seen as the biggest struggle for people to create the shift to move from manager to leader? Where has been the biggest struggle for an executive uh, to move from operating completely hands on, being completely in control, to letting go and being the leader? What has been the biggest struggle for executives?
That's
And
a
how do you
that's a
solve it?
that's a really good question. And let me take perhaps a little bit of an alternative route to answer that question, because I think it touches on something very, very important. And in the book that you have, Executive Ownershift: Creating Highly Effective Leadership Teams, I open with a story, a true story, uh, of me being 8 years old, sitting at the dinner table with my mother and father and my younger brother and sister. And it was raining outside, and my father was a football coach. And in the Midwest, in Iowa, being a football coach is, I don't want to be sacrilegious here, but it's almost like being the Pope. I mean, it's like it's positioned higher than the mayor. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It just is. We're sitting there at the dinner table, and the doorbell rings, and I get up and go to the doorbell, and there's this huge guy standing in front of the door, and it's raining outside. And he says, "Is Coach home?" And I just stand there and look at this guy. And he says again, "Is Coach home?" And I go back and tell my dad, "Hey, Dad, there's a guy out here. He doesn't look in such good shape. He wants to see you." My dad goes out, takes him in the living room. My mom puts on a pot of coffee, runs us all upstairs. And I can hear some, really some emotional expression. The guy's crying and everything. And I can't hear what's going on. I'm sitting at the top of the stairs trying to hear. And we go to bed. And the next day I say to my dad, "Dad, what was going on last night? Who was that?" And he said, "Well, that was so-and-so." I'm not going to mention any names. And this happened several times over the course of my childhood. And I said, "That was so-and-so." I said, "That guy was the quarterback of your football team. He was like all conference. He was all state. I mean, he was like the hero." I said, "He didn't look so good last night." And my dad says, life will give all of us at times more than we can handle. And some people drown it in drink. Some people just ignore it. And some people just have the courage and the strength to go look for help. That is to be vulnerable and to say, "I can't handle this. I need some help." Now, it's a long answer to your question that you ask about this shift between manager to leader. But it took me years before I really understood what my father was talking about. And when I got into executive coaching, executive consultant, advisory work, one of the strongest distinctions I saw between managers who became leaders and leaders who became executives and executives who became exceptional executives was the ability to be vulnerable, the ability to say, "Guys, I don't really know what the way forward looks like. I know there is a way forward, and together I think we can work it out." Or to say, "Things aren't working real well, the team right now, and I know that that's in part my responsibility. And I'd like to work with you guys to understand how I can show up better as a leader so that we can show up better as a team." It sounds like really simple, basic stuff, but this ability to be authentic, this ability to be vulnerable is absolutely essential for, I would say, manager to leader and on further.
At workplace, people feel threatened, right? Being vulnerable. They feel like they're letting their guards down. They don't know where to draw the line. Sometimes they might go all out vulnerable and then it might cost them their jobs. So,
Yeah, well, yeah, good point. Just remember, but just to take on board this idea of authenticity and vulnerability is really important, and to recognize that if, particularly for a manager or a leader, when something's not working in the team, to first of all say, "What's my role in that? What's my role in that? I don't have to accept all of it, but what's my role in that?" Now, being vulnerable is not the same as full disclosure. What you just referred, so it's not full disclosure is not being authentic. Sometimes we just want somebody to lay everything on. That's not what I'm talking about here. But if I'm not being authentic, if I'm not being vulnerable, then I'm playing some sort of game, right? I'm trying to show a certain part. That takes a lot of energy for me to do that. And it takes a lot of energy for people to understand what kind of role is my leader trying to play. But when a leader is authentic, then people can relax, trust develops, problems get solved faster, transparency is more present, and we can lay issues on the table. It doesn't necessarily lead to perfection, but it does lead to progress.
So imagine if there is a first-time manager who's listening to us right now, and we're giving him some tips on how to be vulnerable, how to be authentic, how to lead instead of just manage. What would you say?
Great question. And I remember my first days as a manager, my very first days, I was a very performance-driven guy. I was a performance-driven animal, and that's why I was promoted into managing my first team. Everybody was older than me. But if I could give some advice to my former self, some 45 years ago, and to your listeners who are out there who might be in a first-time management role as a manager leading a team, is, it's not about you. As much as we'd like to think, as long as you think it's about you, there's a huge amount of pressure on you. There's a huge amount of pressure on you to perform. But it's to get an understanding of, and I would go back to the basics, which we just mentioned earlier, a very keen expectation exchange. So, what do I expect of my team members? What can my team members expect of me? And what do we expect of each other? And to realize that all this stuff about managing isn't about you. It's about enabling the people in your team and your business to be successful. Now that at times is creates a little bit of a tension. But do I understand and know the needs and ambitions of the players in my team? I mean, and different cultures and different types of personalities will disclose more information and others less. But still, to make a personal connection with members of your team is important. What do they like to do when they're not at work? What really motivates them? Where would they like to be in 2 or 3 years? If I'm the manager, how can I support you to be successful? Yeah. Now, it's not always going to match one-on-one, but to show an interest in people, I can remember doing work, and I did a lot of work at the European Patent Office. I mean, what an organization this is. You've got 10, 12,000 highly talented people who are processing the intellectual property requests of the whole patenting process for Europe. I mean, PhDs, speak 3 or 4 languages. It's an organization with a lot of intellectual firepower. And everybody knows what to do, and it's all very, let's say, objective and empirical. They have to do so many patent applications and things like that. But I've seen times where teams have, when a director said, gosh, I really would like to see us do a little bit more in this area. It's not part of the official brief, but it's really important to me. I think this is an area that we can make a contribution to the office here. And the examiners were like, wow, that's really cool. We didn't really know that was really important for you. Sure, we can step up and do that. Yes, we recognize it's not part of our official brief, and we don't even have to do it, but we want to do it because we see it's important to you. So again, to recap that, being a first-time manager, being a second-time manager, being a manager of manager, being a strategic leader, being executive, it's not about you. It's not about me. It's about the people in the team to get them in a position where they can play at their best and also understand the contributions that they need to make and that we all need to make so that the organization can be successful. Because if the organization is successful, we're all at risk and our customers aren't happy.
You mentioned you were a workhorse animal. You used to work a lot, and therefore that's the reason why you got promoted. And once you got into that role, you started realizing that it's not just about me executing the role and the function and getting other people to do it, but to develop the other people. But not everybody likes doing that. Right?
Well,
everybody is a people person.
Yeah. Let me circle back around. I didn't get promoted because I worked a lot. I got promoted because I always exceeded expectations.
Okay.
So I always outperformed what I was supposed to, either as an individual or the teams that I had. And I had an ability to attract really high performance people. I was a high performance sales professional, and I attracted high performance salespeople. But however, you need also middle performers as well. And so I learned, really after my first 3 or 4 years of management experience, that I was really good at attracting high performance people, but an area of development for me was working on people who did a good job, a solid job, but weren't necessarily going to hit the ball out of the park, to use a baseball metaphor, all the time. So this brings us to the point. So to be, to be an effective first-time manager, manager of managers, strategic leader, or executive, you only have, regardless, I mean, you have different scopes in the organization. One is not better than the other, but you only have three things you have to think about. The only three things you have to do as a manager or as a leader are, number one, you have to enable people to play at their best. So how can I create the conditions where people can really flourish, understand what their role is, things like that. So enable others to perform, number one. Number two, and this is particularly relevant, the higher in the organization you go, how do I lead strategy and change in a meaningful way, right? Because you can't keep your team the same for 20 years, right? Your team has to continue to evolve and what it does. So one is enable others to work in a positive way. Number two is to lead strategy and change in a meaningful way. And the third thing is create results. And everything about managing and leading falls under those three things. It's people, change in strategy, and results. So in my case, I was really good at exceeding results, but I had a hard time keeping, let's say, the middle performers because they were under constant pressure from me. So we know managers who are really good at getting results, but the teams turn over, other functions don't like to work with them. And I've seen people who are actually high on the results orientation, but don't really advance in their career because they just can't, maintain and build, future leaders of their own. So you have to have all three of those.
Yeah. Have you seen situations where in an organization, the leaders are all individually great performers, but when they come together, the collective does not exponentially grow, but comes down actually?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that's one of the insights that was very surprising for me 15 years ago. It was very surprising, as I said, stepping into the C-suite. I didn't come from, I wasn't a McKinsey alumni. I didn't have a PhD from Harvard. I came up through the ranks, through the street, and through my work in middle management and talent management. I had an organization called Envision Learning. I ran that for 25 years. We supported a lot of European and global organizations, top Fortune 1,000 companies in talent management. From time to time, the senior vice president or someone from the CEO's office would say, "Hey, we see what you're doing with our talent management. Could you help our executive team?" And I said, "I'd be happy to, see what I might be able to offer there." And it was just as you described that, really just a collection of stars, but as an operational unit, didn't really play well together. And one of the things that was really surprising for me is that at least initially, the executive teams that I was working with, they didn't really have, they didn't see the connection between their dysfunction. Well, they're fighting, their conflict, they're not supporting each other to be successful. There's like political games being played. And, when I'm helping them understand and become more transparent with that, how that's showing up in the team, and then also helping them understand the link. Well, how is that affecting the organization? If you come in late to an executive meeting and people come straggling in, you start 12 minutes after the hour when you're supposed to start the hour, you can't really expect your key projects to finish on time, because the way you do anything is the way you do everything. And I think that one of the big takeaways of working with me is it's not rocket science, but it's recognizing that what's happening in the leadership team, both let's say good and not so good, is also showing up in the organization. The strategic and executive leadership teams of an organization are like on a cellular level what's happening. And probably 30 to 40% of my time is just spent observing senior leadership meetings. And within 2 hours, I have a very good feel what's happening in the organization, how decisions are met, how they're followed up on, how they execute, how delegation works, how conflict is dealt with, how priorities are being assessed. You really see that in a 2-hour leadership meeting. And if you could provide that back to them in a respectful way, and I'm not there to tell them how to run their business. They all want to be successful, and they've come from a history of success. But at the senior executive team level, they start getting a little frustrated, because they see that by working as an individual superstar, it doesn't always work.
Yeah. Is there a measure? So we know there is EQ, there is IQ. Is there anything called, or is there anything in the corporate lingo called team intelligence? Have you come across it where you can measure team intelligence?
What do you mean by team intelligence?
I don't know. I'm just curious, just to see how a team, because measuring a team's capabilities and ability to perform at a very high level, right? Is there a diagnostic tool for that? Is there a way for you, when you do your work with them, that they're able to, I don't know if they can self-diagnose, because when you're in the frame, you cannot see the picture, right?
Yeah.
So you need someone external to come in and do the work. Yet, is there a way for an organization to at least do some kind of a self-diagnosis to understand, okay, the team intelligence individually is great, but collectively is struggling, and we need to work on this or correct this?
Yeah, it's a good question. Let me answer that in a pragmatic, street sense way, how I work with that. So first of all, there are a couple of diagnostics on my website. One is also in the book about how you can diagnose the signature strengths of a executive leadership team, or any leadership team for that matter. And also you could sort of test your strategy through the 5 key elements of strategic clarity and excellence. But let's come back to your point. So before I work with any leadership team, it's really important that I talk to all the members of the team. And this is not an empirical data-based analysis such as we were just discussing. It's a subjective one. I call it the perception consolidation. So I speak to every member of a leadership team before I work with anybody. And that's to understand, how do they see themselves? How do they see their role? What's working in the leadership team that they're a part of? What's not working? How do they understand strategy? What's working well? Where are some elements where they could, if they put some energy in it, they would improve? And if they were to come together as a team, what would success look like? So they're very open-ended questions, and I will have those conversations. And they're all confidential. All the responses are anonymous. There are no names in that perception consolidation except the CEO. In 15 years, I've never had a CEO that didn't want some feedback collected for her or for him. So I might ask, let's say Susan is the CEO of the organization. I might say, Susan has asked me on her behalf to gather some feedback on what she's doing that's working really well for you and for the team. And what's one thing she could do differently, that if she did that, it would enable you or the team to be more successful. That's the only very specific name that's mentioned in there. Then I put that together in a document. It's usually between 7 to 10 pages, and they're just responses. And it's remarkable what this perception consolidation does. First of all, it's a lot less expensive than some huge empirical data-driven thing. And it is subjective, but it does share emotional truths about the team. Then I give that back to the team. I always share that with the CEO before the meetings. Yeah, so the CEO has a chance to go through that. Does it confirm what she sees? Does she see the comments in there? What does she see as the key points? Are there any surprises for her? And once she's okayed that, then that's presented back to the leadership team at the beginning of our work. The team takes a half hour to read that. We say, based on what you've read here and your experiences, what should be the key points that we work on? I mean, I have an agenda in the background. I call it the shadow agenda, but this begins the owner shift. I'm not coming in to give them a training or to tell them what they should do. I'm there to enable them to recreate, the best version of this team, and I've always felt we shouldn't rob leaders of the opportunity to create their own breakthroughs. So this approach, as simple as it sounds, is breakthrough. So a lot of consultants or coaches or universities who want to bring in diagnostics and tools and drop them on people and test them out and then validate them. I just ask the people, what's working, what's not working, what does success look like? And it's a powerful accelerator. And it also brings a lot of unspoken truths on the table, because you'll have comments like, our strategy doesn't make any sense. We have too many priorities. There are hidden agendas in our team. We don't work together as one. Now, for people that have been highly successful, they might say that by the coffee machine or by the water fountain, but it's not talked about explicitly in the leadership meeting.
Okay.
But when that laid on the table, that becomes the ground. Now it's game to work on. It's no longer invisible. It's no longer a, let me say, non-material reality. It's no longer the bottom part of the iceberg. It's now laying on top of the water, and it's fair game. And we can address that, and we do. So that's one very specific measure that is really been a game changer for me. And years after years of experience, after 15 years of using perception consolidations, leaders still tell me today, using that very basic tool to reflect back to us what we're thinking but not sharing openly in the team was the catalyst that begins our ownership.
Yeah. Again, vulnerability is playing over there, right? It's about they being open, even though they're not revealing names, at least what's in their minds is coming on the table and they're able to deal with it.
Yeah.
My question also came from another lens, which is, if you know what your team IQ is, let's call it TIQ, then there is a way for you to raise it, right? Then how do you raise TIQ, if at all? So if, let's say, you do perception consolidation, you get all of these inputs. What are you improving over here?
Yeah. I mean, obviously there are some things that are common to high performance leadership teams. Things like having purposeful practices. Do we have a clear purpose for our executive team? Do we know what our unique contribution is? For example, do we run down every rabbit hole? Do we discuss for hours the car policy that should belong to the fleet manager? I see in so many leadership teams that there's a lack of discipline, a lack of structure in what they address because they're not accountable to anyone. Now, they're also working on some very good stuff, but leadership teams should only be working on the things that they can do and leave the things that can be done by others to them. So purposeful practices is one of the signature strengths of a leadership team. Second of all is a results-driven structure. Do we have a clear and understanding and explicit process for decision-making, for giving feedback to each other? Are roles and responsibilities clear within the leadership team? Who does what? So that's the second signature strength. And the third is, making meetings matter. So do you have a, is the meeting that the leadership team leads, is that the best meeting in the company? Surprisingly, I don't even think in the last 7 or 8 years I've ever had a leadership team like this is the meeting that's a best practice, and we would like to broadcast that. I mean, obviously the issues are confidential, but they'll say, our leadership meeting, no way. So again, not trying to throw stones at a glass house, but that's a signature strength. If you want to improve your leadership team, one of the strongest places to start, and yes, in a way you could say it's boosting team intelligence, is what is the quality and collaboration index in our leadership team meetings? Yeah. Also driving a sensible strategy, and are we leading our team in such a way that it creates a culture of ownership? That's a fifth signature strength. And last but not least, and surprisingly, one that most people wouldn't recognize, but it's do we have a strong, let me say, resilient relationship index in the team? That is, can we give strong feedback to each other? Now that maybe doesn't sound like an intelligence indicator, but if there isn't a atmosphere of give and take, strong, heavy feedback with each other. And some teams believe that, I can't criticize one of my colleagues in their function because that's their business. And if I criticize them, they're going to criticize me. Thus, performance lags. So, yes, I mean, that could probably be worked into some kind of intelligence metric. So you give me an idea there. So,
yeah.
Something to think about.
There is a question from one of our listeners over here right now, regarding perception consolidation from Javed Khan. How do you measure or showcase that in a format which is agreeable or digestible by leaders rather than being dismissive?
Well, first of all, they're all very excited to get a copy of that perception consolidation.
Hmm.
And I usually take that feedback. I want it fresh. So the perception consolidation is usually done 3 weeks before, let's say, a global offsite or something like that. So it's quite fresh. It's very confidential. The only person that sees the finished product before it goes to the team is the senior leader. That could be the CEO or head of sales or supply chain. And I can tell you, I've never seen a group that's dismissive, because it's their work. It's their work. It's their consolidation. And the other thing I would say is that sometimes there's a feeling that, oh, it's a bit negative. Sometimes they'll say that, oh, the flavor of this. Often the senior leader will feel maybe a little bit, wow, I didn't realize our team was so bad. And I'll say, let me just put this in perspective. When you go to the doctor, I say, you don't go in the doctor's office and spend 25 minutes telling the doctor how your shoulder's doing well, how your neck has a lot of flexibility, how your arm, or you can move your arm, and, oh, by the way, my knee's killing me. When you go into the doctor, you come right to the point and say, doctor, my knee is killing me. Can you help me with that? And when you meet with a guy like me who works exclusively with leadership teams, you don't spend 25 minutes saying all the things that are good. You usually say, these are the things that if we could work on those with you, Dan, if we could work with you on these things, if you could help us address these things, we will become a better leadership team. So that's my work. I mean, it goes without saying, in every leadership team, in every organization, there are a lot of things that are working very, very well. So how can we replicate that? How can we repeat that? So sometimes it is about showcasing or highlighting a best practice. But I can assure the listener that brought that point up and the others that this is their work. And the risk of it being dismissed would be if I said, here's my observations of the team from observing you, and here's what I think you should work on. I'll come in the back door later with that. I'll come in the back door later as I gain permission to engage with them, when they truly understand that I'm there to help each of them individual, collectively as a team, so they can improve their business. I become a real asset.
So which means with every perception consolidation exercise, you give a perception digestion session as well. Allow them to digest it the right way, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that's how it starts. So after it's handed out for 30 minutes, we say, like, what is it that resonates with you?
Yeah.
What is it that you think is what's confirmed in your thinking by reading this? Do you see your statements in this paper? If you don't, then you have to let me know. I mean, I take the statements as much as I can verbatim in the perception consolidation. I take them verbatim as long as I can keep them confidential. And then I sort those statements according to, I might use categories like team culture and dynamics, team performance, future direction and strategy, organizational structure. It depends on what their comments are about.
Is this an exercise you would recommend managers to do it by themselves with their teams, or they would need someone to intervene to handle this?
That's a good question. That's a good question. Let's take a step back. In a way, this is about, getting expectations and, perceptions on the table. So I think that you could do it verbally. You could have an expectations exchange with your team as a leader. I think you could also ask another team member, another team lead at your same level to come in and do this for your team. For example, this is also an issue that I encourage, leaders or managers to. When was the last time you visited another team? Who are the 2 or 3 business functions that you most collaborate with? When was the last time you went to lunch with them? You could ask the leader from, let's say, supply chain to come into production and do that perception consolidation. Let's say you could, with another team. So it's possible. I do think that for this type of work, it's valuable and advise. I mean, I don't just advise, using externals for all this stuff. For me, this work is about, as you know, when you read my book, there's a lot of stuff that you can use right from the book that you can use tomorrow. It's like get in, drive the car, improve the team. I mean, that's the way I work. And the biggest compliment I can get is when somebody says, gosh, Dan, I used this with my team last week. It was really helpful. Or I shared this with another leader. She's using that. Hey, amen. That's the way it should be. But there are certain things, particularly when you're talking about emotional truths, this is not necessarily empirical data. It's about perceptions. And of course, the Germans have an appropriate word for perception. In German, the word is Wahrnehmung. Wahrnehmen. So wahr means truth, nehmen means take. So a perception is nothing more than the truth I take from a situation. I'm having a certain experience here with you on this. I mean, we know each other, we're in the same field together, but you've got some listeners, they may be getting a very different take on this experience that we're having. And that's the emotional truth that each of us takes. And to be an effective team, we need to understand what are the different emotional truths surrounding our team, surrounding our business challenges, and are we aligned? Are we respectful of the differences? And do we know where we need to align to be effective?
It's interesting you spoke about empirical truth, because the word in my mind was reality, right? So reality consolidation versus perception consolidation. This is what I was thinking of. Did I get it right? Reality consolidation versus perception consolidation?
Yes. Yeah.
If that is the case, can you help our listeners or anyone who is a manager not to fall into the trap of collecting reality consolidation and ask questions that are pertaining to perception consolidation? What would be the difference in the kind of data that they collect?
Well, let me back up. I mean, for me, reality could mean two different things. Reality could be just like reality could be a subjective reality. This is what I experienced in the situation, and there's an empirical reality. Empirical reality is the fact-based. I use the iceberg.
Okay, let's use empirical reality then. So instead of empirical reality was a perception reality. Perception consolidation. I just want the listener or someone, or even myself, to ask myself, am I asking a perception consolidation related question or not? Or am I asking the wrong question for this particular exercise?
Yeah, good question. And I don't know if I can really, I mean, for me, I think for the manager, it's important to be able to distinguish between, let's say, empirical reality and subjective reality, right? And because in empirical reality, these are absolute truths. We performed 16% under our objective. We had a customer service satisfaction level that was at 63%. Our goal is 75. We underperformed there. Okay. So these are all statements related to empirical reality. So a team needs, clear goals, very clear goals, and let's say meaningful KPIs, not KPIs in overdrive that people are searching to perform on KPIs and they forget what the overall goal is. So we need those empirical measures to show how well the team performs. That's the language of the organization. The organization is a rational being, so the team has to have a clear set of that. That's one thing. But when someone in the team says at the team meeting and you're digesting this stuff, and the leader says, we're 16%, we performed 16% under our target in this particular area, that's an objective reality. But when a team member says our strategy isn't clear, this is where the manager has to be awake and understand that statement is a perception. That statement is an emotional truth. So when I'm operating in the empirical reality and I say, look, we did 4,220 and we were supposed to do 5,000, we underperformed there, there really shouldn't be any argument. There really shouldn't be any debate. I mean, it's empirical, it's a truth. But when someone says in the team, our strategy is not clear, and that's why we underperformed, if I, as the manager, then say, well, of course the strategy is clear. I've mentioned it 3 times. I've told everybody, if you don't understand it, then you're brain dead. This is how misunderstandings start. So what I need to recognize as a manager is the conversation that I'm having, is it empirical based? Is it based on facts above the iceberg? What I can see, what's visible, what's transparent, what's transferable? Or is it the emotional truth from a particular person? Because the one of the ways to respond when someone says the strategy isn't clear, our strategy isn't clear, that's why we're underperforming. Then I want to get more information. Say, well, thanks for sharing that. I appreciate you speaking up. What is it about our strategy that's not clear? What areas do we need to put more emphasis on to drive that clarity? But sometimes in the moment, young managers, old managers, experienced managers, senior managers, we forget which operating plane we're on.
Yeah.
And this is really, really important because there is no ultimate right in perceptions, right? It's about, I want to make sure that I'm hearing what's going on, that people feel understood, and that we build a basis and a pragmatic plan to go forward. So that's where things can really start to spiral.
If I were to summarize what you just shared, I would say perception consolidations is about feelings, empirical truth is about data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. And I would say that the feelings, though, are sometimes packed with types of material artifacts, such as we have far too many priorities. Now, that's a perception statement. You would think that, well, priorities, okay, that's something objective, that's something measurable, but what is too many priorities? What is a priority? So you're right. I would just build it. It's a little more than just saying, I'm really disappointed with the way we get strategies. So often at the senior leadership level, people don't get so clear with their emotional disclosure, but it's an emotional truth because it's subjective. So in principle, yes, data, feelings.
It's really about listening to the words, right? And listening and unpacking what's really being said and really going behind what is being said. And that is, I think, the true work of a manager, not just reacting to everything that is being said, but finding the truth behind those words, which reflects the context that somebody else is holding.
Absolutely. Just surrender to the pain of the pause. When someone says something and it maybe triggers a young manager or even an old manager, I know that feeling. There isn't a need to respond in lightning speed. And so often, and I include myself, first of all, as a young manager, I started to answer questions before people even finished the question. I mean, does it show how smart I am? No. Does it show I'm a poor listener? Yes. So listen to the question, pause a little bit, and if you just feel a need to say something, you could say, "That's really interesting. Tell me more." Those words are quite simple, but being right blinds all of us. So I think you've summarized that in a good way.
I love what you just said. Surrender to the pain of the pause, especially managers who wants to fix people. They just cannot bite their tongue. They have to give advice. They have to tell people what to do. Right?
Yeah, well, maybe that manager that you just described, that who wants to tell people what to do, maybe what he or she could do is ask a member of the team that they trust to observe the next meeting, and just have someone in the meeting. And you don't have to make it public, but just say, John, before the meeting, I just want you to keep an eye on me. I'm going to moderate our team meeting today, and I just want you to just keep track of how many questions I ask and how many statements I make. Just put little X's down there and let me see what it looks like afterwards. Now, obviously, depending on the type of meeting, the manager has to be directive at some point, has to share information. So that's a given. But it's sometimes remarkable when you ask someone to serve as a buddy and to make the how many questions did I ask audit. It's quite surprising. And if we don't ask questions, it's hard to gather understanding. And asking questions and listening is a tremendous way to show respect.
It's a muscle I constantly exercise, even right now here, right?
Yeah.
And I can't believe it's almost an hour right now. It's finished, and I really want to. But I want to ask you one last question, or one theme I've wanted to really touch on, which is AI. And how do you see AI coming into the work that you do, number one, and number two, to what managers do?
Well, it's a trans industry and it's a transgenerational technology, which means it's going to, I don't think there's an industry that's really untouched by the evolution of artificial intelligence. And I think it will be something that's how we deal with that will affect generations to come. So I think it's a game that we all have to play in. I mean, today, I can't really tell you, my brother could, because he's a software engineer. My brother could tell us pretty quickly, how the iPhone that I use every day works. My software skills, I know how to operate it. I know how to make it work. I know how to make my work more effective and how to schedule things with my clients, but I can't explain the operating principles. And I think AI, I'm not necessarily convinced that you need to absolutely understand all the large language models and, and the botches and the hallucination, all that. You have to really understand it from a software perspective, how it works. But I think it's going to touch all of us and we have to be involved. So it's been very helpful for me as I ran a team of 15 consultants for 25 years. I like to play in teams. I like to work in teams. I like to debate in teams. And I still have, many, let's say, industry colleagues that I use as sparring partners. Every couple of months, we have a sparring partner set up with 8 or 9 consultants from around the world that I spar with. But at the very lowest level, it's, become a sparring partner for me. My AI companion, if you will. And also just on I had a secretary and 3 team assistants for 15 years. And now I don't have any employees. I don't have an office anymore. I work at home. So even for certain administrative things and scheduling things and writing letters in German, I can understand German. I speak German, but I never really learned to write it, let's say, at a high academic level. And now I can give something and it's written in German and I can read it and understand if it's the right tone or not. I can look at variations. So I think that you just got to be involved. It's just something you've got to get involved with.
My theory is AI will replace a lot of managers, but never a leader. Do you agree?
Well, that's a yes or no question. So I will leave that open right now. I think it's going to change everything that we do. But when one door closes, another door opens. The constraints that I faced when I came to Germany with no language skills, didn't know one single person, had no work papers, and nevertheless, I was able to create a multi-million-dollar consulting and training practice, not through my efforts alone, through a lot of people that came and helped me. I really learned that constraints can be very advantageous and offer a lot of opportunities. So I know there's a lot of talk right now, and it's, to some degree true that AI will replace a lot of this and that and change everything. It's all true, but it will also open some remarkable doors for all of us. It will open remarkable doors for all of us as long as we're open to the doors that are opening. And I think that's the spirit to embrace AI going forward.
Just yesterday, I was telling to a friend of mine, every constraint is a blessing if you see it as one.
Well, you've got a great attitude. I think that's why I'm attracted to you. So you have an outlook on life that is very positive, welcoming, curious, and that's why I just think you're a star.
I hope everyone has those qualities as well. That's what will make this world a better place for all of us.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dan. You've been amazing. Thank you for the amazing work that you keep doing, the ownership that you create in people, the way you lead, and for this friendship. Thank you.
Thank you, Samir. It's been a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you.